Back today, we are doing part 5 of talking to reptiles, and it's specifically more to deal with body language itself and how it emanates from your spirit. And there's nary a thing you can do that you can do about it. And it is discovered, not learned. We did not build the language of body, the body language. It wasn't actually installed by culture. I believe that's a misconception. And it's more inherent in that you would necessarily showcase a body language more dependent on how you limbically felt. And so how you limbically felt isn't really a cultural language. There's a stamina to the amount of resistance that each of us have to pain and strife. That is certainly cultural. And so, of course, you could see that cultural implications, right? But below that, there is this primal language. It's a Gaia language. I'd like for you guys to consider, if you haven't already, that the word Gaia is spelled G-A-I-A, and it has the letters A-I right in the middle of it. And I'm not trying to get everyone to think about, oh, we're all computers. I don't think we're computers. I think it's far more profound than that. But I think with the Oracle mythology, we tend to broadcast the truth of what we are. And one of the beautiful interfaces that we have, of course, is this body. You are the primal collection of the greatest bits of every part of species put together in an all-star team, living in one singular reef, a walking magician's wand of your spine. And this spine has sub wands of arms and legs, and the arms and legs have sub wands inside of there of fingers, and all of these things are broadcasting an electrical willpower. And this electrical willpower would be in every single situation. Absolutely, the word is pure magic. You have pure magic in your veins, and you dispel this magic because no matter what the fuck happens when you wake up, there's still this essence of I am that is coursing through your metachloridians. Every cell in your body, right, is coursing and screaming out the name of you. It's you. The name of God in your body is you, right? And so the body language itself is the religion of the people, and the religion of the people is going to be somatically broadcasted in the religion of the culture that you see. So when you're looking at body language and when you are analyzing the truth of who someone is, I want you to think about understanding that this person is a culture. They are a foreign land that I have met. And I have set up a trade agreement with this foreign land, and they have dignitaries that I can please in various ways. And I may please some of them with my posture. I may displease others of them with my tendency to use curse words. And that all of these things are not really dealing with a singular person. We choose to call it France. We choose to call it Denmark, right? But we know deep down that there's not a singular person running the country of Denmark. Or could be Denmark. But France, no. It's many, many people, right? And we personify these things to simplify them, and that this whole approach to body language is just doing the same thing, right? So we're discovering this. This is not something we've written. It's something that we discovered about ourselves. And I remind you all again that the olfactory gland that's in the top of your mouth, in the roof of your mouth, you turned off when you were born. Culturally, it was decided, your parents decided, the culture around you decided that you need to suppress this olfactory bulb, and that with that olfactory bulb of suppression, there comes something that we call identity. We're going to get to that, though. I want to refresh you on this slide that I showed you as we ended last time, which is that to first say that sincerity will always come first through the body, every time. The sincerity of the truth of not just the reptile, but what the entire creature means, what the entire country of you means. Every single part, every single entity, every currency, every corporation inside that country will be broadcasting its thoughts to you through the sincerity of body language. And the face is the main instrument to interface. That's literally why we call it interface, probably, right? That to interface with the body, you touch your face. You touch your face to interface with the body. And so when you're watching someone touch their face, you're watching them congruenate how they feel to the rest of the world. You can't help it. Your system has a certain feeling. When you watch poker, when you watch poker matches, professional poker, you were looking at the epitome of body language suppression. That there's an art form to the lack of showcasing the truth of what your body is saying to you. And that the world-class poker players that you see that do well consistently are psychological. Everything that they do is psychological in nature. Very little of it has to do, well, not very, I don't know the percentage, but luck is not the primary factor. And you know this because if you've ever watched or looked into this whole concept that there's professional poker players, at first you might think, well, that sounds dumb, impossible, and inconsistent with the laws of reality. But you're forgetting the psychology of the game of poker. The psychology of the game of poker is probably one of the most profound forms of play that we have. The only thing I think more profound would be a drug deal involving guns, where you have a certain amount more that's riding on the line, that's not just about money or not just about the lack of money, but it's something even more essential, and that you find yourself finding the metal of you inside these moments, and that these are the only moments that you could forge your identity, tell the world who you are. And the reason why I'm saying this is because you're about to find out that your identity is built on the concept of deceit. You are the space between the reptile and the mammal. Oh shoot, I'm hiding this little guy. There he is. You are the space between the reptile and the mammal. Technically, your identity is just not just to reduce you, but technically our identities are micro gestures. That we've consolidated our micro gestures into a concept of who we say that we are, and that really is who we are. That we're not the reptile and we're not the mammalian. We are the space between the notes, and that space between the notes is a constant fluctuation of insisting that we're not a reptile or we're not a mammal, or that we are more reptilian, or that we can learn to be more reptilian, or we can learn to be more mammalian. The art of sales is another perfect example of this difference of identity, that there's a switching over of identity to where the culture itself becomes a source of food for the salesperson, and that source of food that's exists outside in the form of people is a reptilian. Not even to reduce it, this has never been an insult to reptiles or to salesmen, but that to find that kind of existentialism is a reptilian spirit. The same spirit is there inside of a lawyer. The same spirit is inside of a surgeon. It is a strategic place to insert your assemblage point to identify between these two species that you carry. Remember, you are not a singularity. You are a country. You are a microclimate. You are a consistent, diplomatic, huge conglomerate. And quite frankly, it's kind of a mess sometimes. It's getting passports in and out is very difficult. Sometimes you don't know where your inside is, where your outside is. It's very confusing. There's a lot of systems at play. You're constantly claiming that this skin that you insist is yours and is important, that you're also insisting that you get to shed this skin 24 hours a day at millions and millions of particles that you've decided are not even you, and that thing that you've said is not you literally is the definition of like your hair, your fingernails, and the outer layer of your epidermis. The exterior of you is actually a rejection of you that you purposely rejected, that all those parts of you you've sacrificed for the sole purpose of building a barrier between what is you and what is not you, between this micro gesture culture that we're talking about. Stillness does not equate tranquility. We're stepping into the body language part of this now, and I want you to understand that the concept of being still is actually not necessarily a tranquil thing. I do not want to disturb your idea of meditation or peace and the idea of focusing on a still pool of water. All that's great. There's no beefs here. I personally love a quiet library, especially when you're trying to find that. It's very important. But I want you to understand that the concept of stillness is not actually a system of tranquility that's beat into your system. If you look back logically, stillness often means deception. And if you think about nature, if you think about the history of animals, that what animals do when they get afraid is they get quiet and they get still. They get still. They're like, oh, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going around. Boom, boom, right? This paranoia comes with a stillness. And it's because that stillness does not necessarily equal tranquility. And I want you to think about that as you start to build a... So first of all, I can't claim, oh my goodness, the moon. Hello. This concept of tranquility when it comes to how it relates to... Okay, so first of all, I can't say that we are inventing body language system for you. You've been doing it since you were born. You were communicating on a body language level with your mother long before you had words to speak, right? It's incorrect to call it a meta language. It's a pre-meta language. It's a subterranean thing. And so built into that subterranean thing, you would have to compassionate the reptile and the mammal. And here's where you start to understand that the stillness does not necessarily equal tranquility, that the stillness is a form of deception. That to be tranquil is to seek out. Sorry, I'm making sure I'm not clicking the wrong button here. To seek stillness is often to seek deception, because you want someone to not understand that you're there. You become invisible in your stillness. And so when you start to analyze body language, I want you to understand that, as you can see by this chart, that there's an analysis done on the way someone stands, and that the way that they stand, they're watching a monitor, and that they're given reactions. The reactions to what they're seeing on the monitor are visually recorded in tandem with how their posture moves. And you can see that an angry posture is a very precise posture. There's not a lot of tracking that's going on. A neutral is a little bit looser, and a happy is full, flat-out rhythm. There is a dance, there is a rhythm to it. There is a seeking of a rhythm of some kind, a looking, a finding for, or a broadcasting And I want you to think about when you get quiet, right? When you're like, I'm in the forest and I'm going to get quiet, you stop broadcasting. You're not broadcasting. You've gotten quiet. You're not speaking because you've shut down communication. So the very act of movement is the act of identity. You're identifying yourself as a living creature simply by moving. And we know this inherent to everything. Deepest in our bones, we know this. That stop. Everybody, look what's going around, right? It's built in. And this is the first and best way to watch and understand someone is to notice their movement, just their movement itself. And that the idea of that stopped you in your tracks is literal because it goes back to this exact same thing, which means when you say something to someone, you have the opportunity for the very first time to reveal something to them. And in this opportunity, you have another opportunity to watch their reaction under a lie detecting environment in reference to how they respond. Now, when I say a lie detecting environment, I don't want you to think about it as lying. I want you to understand that body language is not about, I'm ashamed of what I did, so I'm going to hold my shoulder. I'm going to lie. It's not actually lying so much as it's about shame blossoming. That you have blossoms of shame that have created quirks inside of you. The way you dress, your shyness, the insecurities that you show are tangible forms of this exact same thing. And you can understand a flower by understanding how this flower blooms. The foxglove points down, right? The most beautiful parts of the flower you never get to see. It only wants this little small creatures to understand how beautiful it is. Why? And that posture tells you everything about the flower. It's actually a poisonous flower. It actually doesn't want your attention. It's like, dude, what else do you want me to do? I've turned my ass away from you. I'm literally poison to you. Why are you bringing me home? Right? Because you're so beautiful. No, I'm not. I'm not, says the fox. I will find another way. And that when we broadcast using this stillness, you see the same kind of firmness, that broadcasts a certain kind of message. This message usually means deception. And the deception is usually a form of identity. It's a form of identity. Deception is not a flaw in someone. Deception is a feature of someone's identity. What? I swear it is. And we are surrounded by liars. You, me, I'm a liar. I'm telling the truth right now when I say I'm a liar. It's confusing as hell. And we're surrounded by that because we are creatures of deception, because the art of deception is inherently at the very root of who and what we are. The self deceives to exist, right? The self stops moving to survive. The very most fundamental part of the self, right? Therefore, the self deceives to exist, doesn't it? The self wants to protect its aggrandized ability to be happy, to move. It knows that right now it must be still because the jaguar is here. And we do not move for the jaguar because we, the self, are deceived. We deceive to exist. This is a fundamental. This is not a flaw. This is a fundamental. You're wearing clothes right now. Why? Because you were deceiving all of us. You're deceiving us. Right? And good job. You look great. This fundamental principle of identity is built on the concept of privacy. And what is privacy but an honest form of deception? Right? That's really what privacy is. It's an honest form of deception. It's an inherent, healthy part of who and what you are. At the sense of where the motivation rides, you're going to find out a little bit later that this 4-step process of it eats, it hides, it senses, it moves, can really be broken down into 3 things, which is it eats, it senses, it moves. It eats, it senses, it moves. That these 3 things are the fundamental algorithm of every single part of what makes you alive, and this algorithm ends up expressing itself through this body language. These 3 systems can be seen quite clearly, much like any kind of electrical device. That your brain has a blue wire and a red wire. And the red wire is the sensing. It's the thing that's pulling the electrons in. The red wire is the hot one. Touch that to your tongue, right? It's pulling the senses in. And the blue wire is sending the signals out. And so at the very heart of what you are a circuit device. And at the heart of your brain, you have a multidimensional circuit or a multidimensional 2-wire system which comes in, which is the sensory part of your brain, the cortex, and the motor part of your brain. This extroceptive and introceptive and proprioceptive are the 3 basic tenets of all your cortical stress and strife when it comes to making choices in the world. You're either going to be perceiving stimulus outside of your body or inserting stimulus inside of your body. And that you're going to control the posture of your antenna at all times, but ultimately you're broken down to doing one of 3 things. That every single thing that you have and can do is broken down into one of these 3 things because you have 2 wires, basically. And those 2 wires are in a certain part of your brain, and I want you to understand that brain because all of the body language is going to be broadcast into this location. This is simply here in case you're watching this video later and you're like, this is really interesting, and this is just a quick little slide I found that I thought was pretty helpful that just kind of shows where everything is. I also want to take a moment to remind you all that everything is kind of wired backwards. Your eyes are in the front of your head, but we process it in the back, right? Your ventral system is in the front of your chest, right? But we process most of those social skills in the top of our head. And that these systems are the left brain, right, is controlling the right side of the body. The right brain is controlling the left side of the body. Everything's crisscross. And this crisscross nature, I think, more has to do with the fact that you are perceiving the inside and the outside of the same space at exactly the same time. And it's confusing as fuck because no one told you this yet. And you've been going this whole time and you've never really go, oh, fuck. You're perceiving the inside and the outside of a said space, a world, matrix, Maya, whatever you want to call it. You're perceiving the inside and the outside at exactly the same time. And that's what this weird reality is. It requires this multidimensional limbic system that has an interior and an exterior system too. And it starts to build on this idea of what reality really looks like. Because when you understand that every single part of your senses is going to be wired in some way, I'm pointing to this region of my brain, that you understand that the entire landscape of everything that happens to you is actually right here. Every single possible thing that happens to you is right here. It forms this shape. Which means the landscape of Gaia, the landscape of this entire world, is actually the folding of two lobes meeting inside of a nestled crevice. I'm talking about cleavage, right? That this inserting of the left and the right are just cleaved. And that all of these concepts, all of these ideas of who and what you think is coming into this. And it all started. This is what it looks like, this part of your brain. And it started with eat and moved on to sense, and it ended with move. And I use the word end very loosely here. I do not expect you to memorize this chart. You don't need to memorize this chart. I want you to think about, Lord, I was born a rambling clam. And I want you to think about that because if you consider the idea of a clam, all of this will tell you the story automatically. That the very first thing you were was a stone. And that stone got so good at being a stone that it started to develop intricacies. And these intricacies developed over so much time that stone was finally started to say, I no longer identify as a stone. I now identify as a mollusk. And everyone around, all the other stones are like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, man, I'm a mollusk. Well, what's that? I don't know. We're going to work it out. But I pull water in, I swish it around, and I spit it out. And I'm doing really good. I'm like really good at it. I'm so good at it, I'm declaring myself a mollusk. And all the other rocks are like, damn, look at the big guy. Look at the big cheese on this guy, right? If you could picture yourself at that level, the first thing you do is you start to build a sensory motor area inside of you where you can gather the limbic fruits that are around you. That, I'm tired of drinking urine. It'd be great if whenever this pee tide comes in, which I can't seem to figure out what causes a pee tide, but I'd like to close my shell during the red tide. How can I do that? First, I need to determine what's red tide. I need a red tide detector. And so you go about building your first thing. Your first trick is a red tide detector, right? And you develop a cell that has the ability to detect somehow there's red tide. And you learn to trust that. You can shut the shell. And then the red tide is rewarded with all the electricity inside your rock. Your rock is telling the red tide detector, you are the hero. You're the Perseus. You've saved us all. What you have done here will go down in the heroes of history. You are now called an organ. And the red tide is like, oh my God, I'm an organ. And if you think about how this system works, it's very natural. It's very natural how this system self-invents. It invents itself quite naturally. So what's the very first thing the clam does? The very first thing the clam wants to do is he says, I'm a rambling clam. I'm tired of living in this reef. I want to get around. I want to move around, man. I don't like where I'm at. I don't like the depth of where I'm at. I want to find a way to mobilate myself. And the other rocks are like, well, damn, now what's he doing? He's trying to mobilate. Well, what is that? He thinks he can physically move himself. And everyone's like, what the fuck is he talking? What is he doing? He's like, he thinks he could physically dislocate himself and teleport into a new destination. And everyone's like, well, why would he want to do that? I don't know why. But he does. And he begins to build the motor cortex. And the very first thing that he does is he develops a tongue. Right? Because he already has his abdomen, right? I told you he pulls in the water, he swishes it around. He controls it with the pharynx, he spits it out. And the next thing he does is like, I want a tongue. I want a tongue because if I had a tongue, I could pull my tongue out of this clam and I could move myself half an inch to the left, right? I know you've heard me say this before, but this is how you build this system. And when you start to look at where someone is communicating there somatically, understanding the brain is you're going to understand the head. When you understand the head, you understand where all of these things are touching itself, right? And so the very first thing that we developed was the tongue. And that tongue was the foot. It was our first appendage, the very first one. And from that tongue, we developed the jaw. Why? Because the jaw allowed us to not only swish things in, but we could actually pound and convolve. I'm sorry, it's called like to pulverize. Thank you. To pulverize, right? If we could pulverize the swishies that we're building in, we could pull out the riches that come with it faster. And if we had these things pulverized, if we had gums that were attached to the pulverization, we could use the gums as sensory devices, and lips and teeth. All those would come next, wouldn't they? And it's only after noticing that we have these parts of the teeth, the gums, the tongue, it's only from that point that we start to even consider the idea of a face or of a nose. Why? Because we develop the luxury of discernment. We are so good at being a rock that swishes water that we're now so good at it that we want to reject certain water. We really, literally want to say, I don't want to drink you. That's how rich I am. I'm so rich, I'm going to not take the environment. I've got plenty. I'm doing fine. This is huge. This is a big thing. You start to discern. You start to shut off. So what is the nose? It's a dangling cave that holds itself. Keep in mind that your olfactories were there before your nose. Your nose was a lamp. A lamppost came out and created a crevice where no one else could smell. So really, the development of your nose wasn't really the sense of smell. It was the sense of not smell. You developed the sense to not smell things. And by developing the sense of shielding and not smelling things, you developed a sacred crevice to where things could be brought into this chamber and they could be smelled in a purified way, right? So the sense of smell isn't necessarily the activation of chemo signaling. It's the discernment of chemo signals under a precise environment, right? It's a field kit for chemo signaling. As you go up through these systems, they become quite natural. That as we discern what we want to smell, what we want to taste, what we want to swallow, we learn to then see these things that we've discerned from farther away. So then comes the eyes. And after this, we get sophisticated and we decide, I'm tired of having calluses on my tongue. I would love to develop a thumb. Would love to develop some fingers, a hand and a forearm and elbows. These are wonderful things. And while we have it, why don't I extend my head further along so I could be taller up or lower if I wanted to? So I don't have to necessarily move myself all the time. I physically could just stretch my neck up and down. It's like, holy shit, what a concept. And you're inventing these amazing things that you've never seen before. But you're doing it. You're doing it. And each of these systems, you're building it on top of yourself. So if you remember the story of the rambling clam, I think that you're going to naturally understand where all the sensory motor equipment is, how it fits in there, why it's there, why it came later than what you might think, right? Lord, I was born. You have these three systems. This yellow system is this ventral system. It's your social system. This red system is your sympathetic system. We've been using that word a lot lately, but this idea that you enter into a parasympathetic state really is the idea that your sympathetic system is still there, but you can now afford the luxury to shut it down, to squeeze it, to deceive it. What did I just say? To deceive it. That you developed a system to deceive yourself, and that the system that you use to deceive your own system is your identity. I'm afraid of spiders. Oh my God, I'm afraid of spiders, right? That's your identity deceiving itself about a certain particular trait that gives you a personality, and people either find that endearing or not, right? Another chart I just want you to have if you're scrolling through here and you just start to look around, as you're about to see these different parts of the brain are triggered as we encounter different things, and that we have no choice but to, our lie detectors, our fingers point directly at these things as we say them. I'm sorry, that must have been a duplicate. And that this map that you're looking at is another part of this system. It's showing you the tongue, gums. This is the homunculus. Is what this map is. Here's the cleavage. And look at the very base of the cleavage. At the very heart of it all is the genitals. So it's like a primal unfolding. If you think about this as the center of the cleavage and the outside where the primal nature is, and that this thing is it's unfolding, which means our brains are becoming more orca-like. If you saw the picture of the orca brain from last time, right? That they're unwinding in that direction. They're unfolding like a cauliflower. Okay, so I want you all to picture that you're at a stop sign on a relaxing day, and you look in the rearview mirror of your car, and you see a barreling car heading right through your rearview mirror, and it's just pummeling at you. And what does your body do? Because mine goes, I close my eyes, my turtle my neck, I pull my turtle. You ask yourself, don't have me tell you. Picture this moment. And what does your body do, right? You feel your shoulders. Your shoulders cobra. They kind of cobra up like this. Your neck goes down and you wince, and your chin right here tightens, and your jaw becomes immobilized. It stops moving. Additionally, if it's needed, cortisol comes rushing into your system to provide you with just instant fast twitch energy. Your fast twitch system is instantly activated. It's ready to go. And in the stress of activating that system, the adrenaline itself has automatically shut down salivatory, your ability to keep your mouth moist. You get dry mouth. You feel prickly. You feel prickly because your system is now losing the lubrication that was just there a moment before. And everything goes local. Everything becomes heightened state, and it tends to slow down. And that you're living in a sensory, sympathetic essence. And that this essence is with you all the time. That this state that you're in, that I've just put you in with this story, is not a state that wasn't there and suddenly is. It's a state that's there all the time. All the time. There's a creature inside of you that's living like that all the time. It doesn't have access to the same things that you have access to. Right? And because of that, it doesn't have the memory or the brain power or the thought patterns to even consider things like, oh, well, this is my trusty friend Steve, right? Steve's a plumber. We live in Des Moines. None of that is happening. And when you start to tap into the somatics of this person, it becomes very easy to communicate to these people. Very easy. But you can't overanalyze them, right? You can't do it. This is a part of the system, which means that all the parts are still there, which means when someone gets activated, what happens is their entire country simply activates its military. The DEFCON 1 happens or whatever, or 5 or whichever, right? And then all the airports go into heightened security alert, right? And there's the colors, right? It's condition marmalade, right? And everyone's like, oh, it's condition marmalade. Oh my goodness. And, and everything changes because it's condition marmalade right now. And that your system does the exact same thing that the country does. We're under a terrorist attack, it says. Alert the media. We're under a terrorist attack. That is cortisol. Just rushing through your system. And that rushing through the system is actually pretty autonomous. It's literally bribing you to, hey, can you go to general quarters? What is general quarters? Is a state that you enter into on a ship, for example, where this is your station of war. And so when they call general quarters, you go, where do you go when you're in a state of war? And you don't go to your bunk. You don't go to the mess hall. You don't go to the shower. You go to your station for general quarters, right? And so the somatic movement of these systems to this, it's not that general quarters wasn't there. It's that you, as king, have tuned your attention to the state of general quarters, which means that all of the awareness, this is where it gets trippy, bear with me. This is where your entire reality changes because your awareness has slipped into sympathetic mode. Physiologically, this is so hard, I know, to believe. I swear to you, I'm not lying. Physiologically, you actually haven't changed. Your awareness and your witness of which system is in charge changes, and that fuels the very system that it gives awareness to. It's no different than you being Princess Diana. And bless her heart, she just wants to go to Waffle House. She just loves hash browns scattered, smothered, covered. But before she was met, before they discovered her, she could do that. It was one of the favorite things she could do. But now after she's discovered, she can't do that anymore because the witness is on her. The witness is there. It's a different meal now. Everything changes. Now the Waffle House is clean. And she's instantly like, well, fuck. What happened to the guy with Tourette syndrome in the parking lot? I love that guy. I walk in. He's like, fuck you. And I'm like, you really awakened me, right? It's the entire experience of what she wants is now impossible. And it's the exact same thing that happens with your sympathetic and your parasympathetic system. Both systems are there, but you as king, man, you were given so much witness to that other system. And just that witness, just... You know, every president gets bitched at. If there's a hurricane in... Okay, when, not if. The next hurricane in New Orleans that occurs, okay, they will bitch at the president because either he went to New Orleans or because he did not go to New Orleans. You understand, right? How this works, right? If you go to New Orleans, you're a sick fuck because you're depleting the resources of a city that's desperately in need, right? But if you don't go to New Orleans, then you're a sick fuck because you don't care about it, right? One time George Bush did a flyby, right? He was like, oh, I think someone did a flyby, and they're like, oh, we looked out the window. It's like, oh, you looked out the window from your fancy plane while everyone was drowning. It's like, you see what I mean? You can't fucking win, man. You can't win. I'm sorry, I just got really, really off track there. Okay, so that was the first one. Now let's do it again, okay? So the first time you just felt that wincing, that turtling of your body, right? Remember the car's coming to hit you. Now I want you to think about loud thrashing music. No pun intended, but like skater punk, just like the most horrible, just rock, I am the boss, I am the boss, you are the best, you are the best, right? And you're just like, oh my God. And it's dark, you just came home late, something has happened, the stereo's been on, you're trying to find it, you're getting across the room. What is your body doing? Where, more specifically, let me rephrase it, where are your hands? Where are your hands? Where do they go? Because I'm wearing headphones, but mine, we call this cover your ears. We call it that. Like, oh, I covered my ears. But you know as well as I do that if you cover your ears, you still hear sound. So, I mean, it helps a little bit, I guess. But I think what we're really doing is we're touching our parietal lobe. We're touching the very lobe of where our auditory senses actually come in. It's actually right above the ears. You'll notice as you look at body language that when something's loud, and when I say loud, the limbic volume of something is loud, right? I can come up to you in a library and tell you something that's super loud, and the volume never reached above 6 decibels, right? So it's the limbic volume is where we tend to give away the language of what we see, hear, and sense. A man grips 2 parts of his brain. Why? This is a common gesture, right? So where is he touching? He's got one hand on the front of his brain and one hand on the back. And so you could interpret this as meaning, well, he's touching his occipital lobe, which is his vision, and he's bracing his movement and his attention. So his expression is conveying what I saw requires grounding. What are your fingers doing? They're grounding, right? You ground your face, right? Like what we talked about with this, right? You ground your face throughout the day. You're constantly grounding it. We're doing a lot of things, right? We're retesting. How many neurons is it from here to here? How long does it take for a signal to get recalibrating temporal time thing? Like that's happening. That's automatically happening. But then when we this, oh, what's wrong, honey? How'd you know something's wrong? Oh, I don't know. It just seemed like something's wrong. What's wrong, honey? Right? The grounding, this is the body language. It's giving us all these beautiful, beautiful clues, right? So with that said, understanding that this is grounding, what is this man doing? He's grounding his occipital. He's grounding the areas of his body that are most affected by what he saw. In this case, you have someone who is exasperated. This experience is potent. She's literally saying that all of the sensory experiences that typically happen through recollection, by the way, this is a recollection process. The somatosensory cortex is responsible for processing recognition and the recall of somatic memory. What I'm trying to say is that if you think about every experience that you have is really, did this happen before or not? Because even if it's the first time that you've had the experience, all that you really give a shit about, I mean, most of your system, all it really cares about is what are the limbic implications of this experience. And the only way, and until it knows the limbic implications of the experience, technically your identity isn't experiencing something, your senses are. If you consider the fact that your identity is built on the process of remembering who you are, then the same thing would be holding true for the experiences that you've already had. I'm trying to tell you that the first time that you have an experience, you actually do not remember it. You member it. You do not remember it. You member it. And that the act of membering something is very different than the act of remembering something. These are two completely different things. And that you are not actually always aware of everything that you member. Did you know that? That a dog, if it has a certain thorn in a certain part of its foot, will not remember that, even though he membered it, even though it was felt, it happened. The vet saw it, the vet pulled it out, the dog never had the experience. It never was able to reach him because of the remembering factor. The very first time that you download a new experience, most of your body is busy qualifying it, quantifying and qualifying it. What is the value of the qualia of this experience, right? You're distilling it. What are you doing? You're swishing, like the clam, you're swishing around the water of this experience in your mouth to determine what is the potency of this experience. And therefore, when you recall the experience that you're having, you can have these kinds of somosensory reactions to it, which is, wow, that is potent. This is a potent memory. And so you show that. You have no choice. You show it. I've said this before, but it's really important to repeat. Your body, your reptile will always say first, your body will always say first, this is how I feel. And then your mind will simply express how embarrassed it was about that. So the very first thing that you convey is your body says, this is how I feel. And then the very next thing that you hear from someone is your neocortex simply trying to justify how embarrassed they are by that reaction. This is the space between the notes, and that's our identity. Most of your identity is caught on your embarrassing factors because identity is built on deception. Why do we have deception? Part of this because our ability to disassociate between the reptile and the mammal is the gestalt, is the circuit, the space, the spark gap, which makes us who we are. So the deception about which side it comes from is really meaningless when we start to understand what our identity really is. Your identity is what you've perceived over and over again. How you choose to deceive others in relation to the limbic collection of all the events that you've had is the essence of who you are. Who you are is going to be built on, here's all the limbic events that I had. And here's the ones that I'm choosing to tell you the truth about. There's your identity. This image, perfect example of occipital lobe, right? What this kid is conveying that he sees. I personally think this kid is acting, but what this kid conveys that he sees is he's conveying that what I'm processing in my occipital lobe is intense, man. It's intense. And you can watch these things. And then when you see someone resting their head, right? You notice how when someone kicks back, they have the same pose and they rest their head. This is resting your eyes. You're resting your eyes right now. You are. You're closing your eyes in public. You ever tried to pretend to be awake? And you're just like, how do I do this, right? This is how you do it. This is how you do it. I can't see none of you people, right? I had no idea what's going on. Right? So we know, isn't it beautiful that we know our anatomy before we're taught anatomy? That your body knows where all this stuff is instantly. It's like it already knows this stuff. It's got no issues figuring out where things are. It's never looked inside itself. Well, not like tangibly. So look at what we got here, right? All of these gestures are giving you this inclination into where and why we're pointing, right? A sinus pressure near the eyes could be the pressure of the retinas themselves. Remember that the retinas are the bishops. Yes, they're the bishops of your body, right? That if you were to add up all the neurons in your body, all the things that calculate and do something, right? That the ones that are pretty high up there, well above the pawns, right, are these bishops, and there's like 200 million or something neurons in your eyes. And the concept of seeing something in your mind is a real thing, because when you see something in your mind, guess what? Electricity goes down into Plato's cave and it renders it. It renders it. And then the efferent nerves pull back up. Hey, what did that feel like? Oh my God, it felt amazing. The colors were so beautiful, right? That's how you know that. You only know that because you went down the holodeck and played it. I need to know how does this song suck? I don't know. I need to hear it. Well, I can't just give you the USB and you just hold it in your hand. No, I need to listen to it. Oh, okay. Well, how do you do that? I got to stop what I'm doing and I got to listen to it. This is how we remember everything. This is why your thoughts are more expensive than we think. This is an economy, right? This is a transaction you're choosing. So back to the occipital lobe though, right? This guy gripping his nose could be saying that what I'm seeing is, so much pressure from what I'm seeing, right? I've never seen actually anyone do this, okay? I want you to know that I think the fake body language is a huge topic that I wanted to talk about. So it's why I put the Q on here. In fact, let's do that now. I cannot emphasize what a profoundly big deal it should be to all of us are that most of us are learning limbic communication. Maybe not most. A lot of the learning of our limbic communication that happens historically happens through the method of television or the technology that we all know what we mean when we say television. And that on that screen, so much of what we ingest is acting. Additionally to the acting, most of us live in a society that insists that being polite is somehow being generous. And that by withholding your true feelings about something, that you are somehow being nice to someone, that that's a kindness that we have. I'm telling you these things because I need you to know that most of culture is purposely telling your limbic system that 2 plus 2 is 5. That because we are watching the neocortex act, when we were watching the sitcom Friends, we are not learning the body language that goes with the script. We are learning a kind of sarcastic body language. We are learning an acted neocortex drip body language, and it's fucking us up. Like I'm telling you guys, this is like at the heart of how fucked up we are at communicators. I would argue that the entire spectrum of ADHD and social identity disorder could even come down to this very thought. I do not think it's flawed. I think it's good that we're deceiving each other because it's making us understand ourselves more and get to the heart of the fact that you can never trust anyone. I see nothing wrong with living in a beautiful world that you cannot trust anyone in. I'm okay with that. And I think that the reason why I have to be okay with that is precisely because we've already said being polite is generous. We've already said all these things. We're teaching each other the body language of deception. And so most of the time, I think when you're watching facial gestures, you need to be really, really careful about, well, how do you even see a real gesture? Most of the work that I put into this presentation started in the summer. And it started because I was trying to figure out, how do you find real gestures? How do you actually find a real fucking gesture? And certainly we could all think of how. It would have to be candid, right? That I think we would all agree. The first thing that would have to occur is they would need to be candid in some way. When I say candid, I don't necessarily mean that it's not like the person can't be seen by anyone. I more mean that the gesture is captured where the person that's having the gesture captured doesn't know that it's being captured. And that if you could just find that situation, that then and only then would you have a subset of data to study true body language. I am not in the CIA. It's hilarious. The rumor going around, I wear a CIA hat to the grocery store. I kind of dig the whole thing. Most of the deception technology that I'm aware of that the CIA utilizes, I do not have secret information. I just happen to read, normal sources, but most of that stuff is legit. Their lie detecting is built purely on the somatic things that we're discussing now. And that in order for them to do that correctly, I think that most of their effort would have had to have gone into finding candid reactions, candid systems where they could use to build a base for a reaction to someone. We're about to get to this part, but I just want you to understand the flaw of having all this world of acting and the flaw of having this world of everyone being polite. It adds to the obscenity of how complex body language is because of just the cultural psychopathy, quite frankly, that exists and just how we relate to each other. But this is why I started this talk by telling you that identity is the space between our deceptions of being a reptile or a mammal. Most of your identity is built on this same inherent idea because we're spark gaps. We're not the gap. We're the spark gap. We're the spark between these things. It's just a fundamental to understanding you, not as an identity, not as an individual, but as a conglomerate country. You cannot touch Denmark, not tangibly, right? It's too big to touch. It's too effervescent to touch. It changes all the time. It's that kind of thing. This is why it's so important to establish a base. If you're able, and if you want to, you could place your hands flat on the table or anywhere. I've got them flat on my desk. And it's not that I'm saying that you need to find your subject that you want to detect whether or not they're being deceptive. This isn't detecting whether or not they're deceptive. Why? Because the body isn't actually lying, nor is the neocortex. The neocortex, when it tells you a story, is just simply telling you, here's how guilty I felt about how my reptile responded. So that's not a lie. That's the truth. It's the truth. And so if you really want to tap into someone, the very first thing you would do is compassionate them. You wouldn't listen to them. You would compassionate them. And how do you compassionate them? You place their hands on a table. You can't say to the person, hey, will you place your hands on the table? Why? I want to ask you some questions. I want to see if you're lying. You can't do that. I mean, you could try it. That would be funny. It would be hilarious, actually. I mean, I'm going to try that. But in the meantime, think about placing their hands on the table. And this is so easy to do. This is so easy to do. Because if you're in the car with someone, their hands are on the wheel, right? And they're, how would this be in the camera? It's like this, right? You're going to ask James a question and I'm here. Well, my hands are on the table. I've established a place where my hands are. And your job is just to tap into my needle. You're tapping into my needle. Where is my needle on the record? You're looking for perturbations. And the perturbations are not telling you if someone's lying. That would be a very binary way of understanding someone. A very judgmental and binary way of judging someone. What if instead of just saying, oh, you're a liar or you're a truth teller, which is, oh my God, how is that even possible? You're now saying, look how complex you are. Look how perturbational you become when I say the words, are you having an affair? What is your perturbation when you do that? Do you see the difference here? There's no judgment here. What is your perturbation when I say, you're beautiful? Because the exact same perturbation happens if I was to say something harsh, or just say something negative, right? And so the only way that you can truly ever listen to someone, the only way you can truly ever listen to someone, think about this. The only way you can truly ever listen to someone is to establish a base first. You wouldn't be able to hear them if you did not first log into someone and say, where's your needle now? Okay, now tell me what you have to say. Do you understand? Because they told you where it is, and now they're telling you the story, and their hands are on the table, and they get to the part where they talk about something painful, and then they keep talking more. And when you ask them questions, you get to a question, and something happens. Or they drop it altogether. And that every one of these situations has the air of a trivial moment. This is so beautiful. Because all of this language that we convey is trivial, 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 which is at the heart of deception. At the heart of deception is none of this, all of this is meaningless. The way I flick my wrist, the way I clear my throat, the way I pause, the way I do not pause, all of this is meaningless. None of this has any bearing on the true essence of who I am as a person. Because if you were to start to read in and notice the way I interface with my face, then you would be able to see me through my clothes, that you would have the x-ray glasses from the back of the magazine. And now I don't want to be around you anymore, because I don't want to be around someone that can see me. I don't want to be around someone that can see me. Why not? Because they're my friend. What the fuck did you just say? I don't want to be around this person when they can see me because they're my friend. The stigma around the porno The girl that gets lost in the world of porno is the exact same motif of deception. Do you understand? Deception, identity. Deception, identity. If your entire identity is you can see every piece and part of me naked on full video on my OnlyFans page, there's no deception anymore, right? And I use this loosely because I'm not the person that thinks, okay, if you're an adult film star, you have no, I'm trying to just talk about that concept itself, because we're so diverse. We have such a beautiful way of exposing ourselves and callousing certain parts of our body, while someone else would consider that the most vital part, and then doing the exact same thing to the opposite, you know, where it's like, the essence of who I am is my elbow. Aw, yeah, my elbow. It's, if you really want to turn me on, you cuddle my elbow, right? Like you're associating in those places. This is again part of how powerful we are. But place their hands flat on the table. It just means tapping into them, compassionating them. And compassionating them doesn't actually require any analytical skill. It requires just an awareness skill. Requires just you're not actually analyzing. You're aware, you're awarenessing, right? You're harnessing awareness. It's not even a purpose so much as a discovery, right? These are different things. Purpose is I inventorially go in to look for a hex nut M5, right? Discovery is what's going on over here? Oh, you got nuts and bolts. Look at that. Wow, you got nuts and bolts. Wow, look at you. Fancy, fancy. Right? So what's truly happening when someone gets anger? When you see this face, you get a first read. I probably shouldn't be on camera. There's a read here. I believe these are honest emotions. A lot of work's gone into finding these pictures. And this is an honest portrayal of anger. It's not a portrayal. It's anger. And I know this is anger because the story that's behind this and what was happening and how these were recorded. But if you look at the tension in the face, you're looking at the true reflexology of what the antenna does when it hears certain things. That the intensity that springs up is simply an awareness that's moving to a sympathetic part of the system that's always in place. That the anger's always there. Eyebrows pulled down. Upper eyelids pulled up, right? Why? Because you're caving. The eyebrows create a cave for the eyes, which gives you the closest form of deception that you can have, correct? Meanwhile, your upper eyelids are pulled up because you are seeing. You want to perceive as much as you can because you're activated right now. You're scared. Lower eyelids pulled up. Margins of lips rolled in. Lips may be tightened. Your digestion is not activated when you're angry. Your lips are tightened and pursed. Your jaw is immobilized. This is not the time to eat. This is the time to do something very different. So what I'm saying to you is that your awareness can simply move around this face, and that it will tell you anger. Will tell you that. And that you only know that. You don't know that because this guy is broadcasting anger. You know that because you compassionate this face and it feels anger. That's what it feels like. It feels like anger. Fear. Eyebrows pulled up and together. Whoops. Upper eyelids pulled up, mouth stretched. Mouth is open. Why? More oxygen. Right? Oh my God, did you just see that? It's a Blair Witch. Quick, get a really low budget film camera, right? Your eyes are wide open because you're in prey mode, which means you're in reception mode. You're in watch. And what is that? That's the hindbrain, right? What is hindbrain? Past, 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 past. What's in the past? What's in the past? What's in the past? Right? What's in the past is what was that? 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 This is a limbic state. What was that? What was that? What was that? Well, I know people. What was that? What was that? Who live this way? What was that? What was that? The entire time. You do too. You do too. That state is always in you. That state does not go away. You do not get the luxury of saying, oh, I'm not like that. No, you are like that. It's just that your awareness is not in that chamber. That's all. Your awareness is not moved into that chamber, and your assemblage point is not situated and said, the deception that I am not fearful right now is the identity of who I am. The reason why you're not afraid is because you do not identify with fear. It's not because you're not afraid. That's all. So the essence of who you are, right, is going to fit somewhere in this picture, or it's not. You get to decide. You get to decide that. That's what's so cool. You get to decide who you are. Disgust. Ugh, look at this. Ugh. Gosh, she is so good at being disgusted, right? Like, she is really disgusted. She is just so... She's like the best disgusted person I've ever seen. God bless her. Eyebrows pulled down. Nose wrinkled, upper lip pulled up, lips loose, right? Why are they loose? She's ready to spit. Why is she ready to spit? What does that mean, to spit? It would be to turn off your parasympathetic system on purpose. Think about it. I take my system of digestion and I remove it from my body. Do you see how fucking wise that is? That the gesture of spitting, in this context, is the very essence of conveying the idea that you make my parasympathetic system disappear. That's what that says. You remove my desire to digest. Puh, right? It's gorgeous. And that's why she doesn't want light. She doesn't need to see. That's why her eyebrows are pulled down. She doesn't need to smell. She doesn't need to ingest. She knows exactly what this is, and she wants nothing to do with it, right? All of us are in a state of disgust all the time. It's true. You're disgusted right now. You find me disgusting. I know it sounds weird. You do. You find me disgusting. There's part of you right now that finds me disgusting. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is walk into that chamber and you're like, God, look at that guy. He disgusts me. And this would just be the identity that you feel, right, during that time. Sadness. Oh, right? Like, I need to get off the screen. I'm regulating. I'm fucking this up. See? Different. I wish I would have cleansed that. Different. You should only see your face. It's the first time. I just broke your virginity. I ruined it. Sadness, right? I mean, look at this. Oh. Inner corner of eyebrows raised. Eyelids loose. Lip corners pulled down. Pulled down. Sinking. Right? A sinking jaw. The jaw is dropped. Why? Because the amount of effort it requires to hold the jaw up would be an expression of my ability to eat, the worthiness that I have to feed myself. Sadness is probably the ultimate litmus test for who belongs in society. Which means that sadness becomes an instrumental part of the family. That the family unit itself would need to rely and utilize the concept of sadness with each other to simply test whether or not, or how strong the social bond was. So sadness isn't necessarily a state of mind that occurs if all the situation is right. Sadness is a kind of lacrimal connection, a body connection. I say this because unless you're a psychopath, which is a whole other conversation, but unless you are, some of you could be, it's not even an insult. You really don't have a choice but to tap into what she feels. Which means that the sadness was already inside of you. Do you understand? You weren't sad before she came up to you and told you what happened. But now you are. But what happened to her didn't happen to her. Didn't happen to you. It happened to her. So these are chambers. Sadness is a chamber inside your heart. So is surprise. The entire eyebrows are pulled up in the sense of actually wanting more. The mouth hangs open because they know if the more oxygen means more brain power. He's not touching his brain saying, oh no, this is too much. No, he's giving all the inclination that he wants more. His eyes want more. His eyes want more. His eyes say more, 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 right? So the surprise is really a magnetic expression of this is good. This stuff tastes good, right? So when you understand, or when you start to look at like all of the senses, all the limbic senses are going to be processed exactly in this really tiny area. And that all those limbic senses are either going to be too much or not enough. And that all of those things are going to convey in some way on the body once their hands are on the table. And I mean that with the face. I mean that with everything, right? How tense is their face now is not a sign of whether or not someone is angry, because angry is not really a state of identity. It's simply a chamber that they've entered into. And you would only know that they've entered into that chamber if you've seen the chamber that they were in before they got there. Which means that when you interact with someone and they're in a state of anger, that's not really necessarily a separation of who they are. It's more of a geolocation. I'm trying to argue that somewhere in your body, there's a focus, an assemblage point, as Carlos Castaneda calls it, but this point in your body, and wherever you point that point, maybe you have 7 of them, maybe you have 8, maybe you have 1, maybe you have 1,000,000, but wherever you point that, all of the effervescent ideas conglomerate, but they conglomerate with more in a certain area because of where you are, right? So if you wanted to live more in the sacrum and be more like, oh, I want to have sex and want to procreate and I want to be a root, I want to be a patriarch, whatever it is that you want to associate with the Mulat Har, right? It's because your assemblage point is lower in your spine that you've moved your captain's table down there, right? And because you did that, it's like Princess Diana, whichever chamber you're in, it's just naturally going to be completely changed because you're there. You really never, this is pretty tricky, you really never have an opportunity to see yourself in your true state when you're not there. You can't walk into the kitchen because everyone knows you're the owner, which means you're never going to be able to see the kitchen in a purely candid state. This should be more profound than you think, because it means it's impossible for you to ever go somewhere. Please hear this. It's impossible for you to ever go or experience anything without you being there, which means that every single thing that you call reality absolutely requires your presence. That everything that's important in the aspect of who you are, your body and your assemblage point and how you identify with things, is purely based on the idea of where your presence is, of where your awareness is. This notion of objective reality outside of the scope is impossible. You've never seen it. All you've noticed is that you have different chambers. And all these chambers have different traits that convey different ideas about what ends up being our identity. I think contempt is probably one of my favorite reactions. I say that because the facial characteristics of contempt showcase you a parasympathetic and a sympathetic reaction that are diametrically opposed to each other, and that we end up having the word contempt assigned to it. In contempt, the eyes are neutral. You can take it or leave it. The lip corner is pulled up and back, but only on one side. The side's going to be dependent on your dominant brain, I think. If you're a left-brain person, if you're a left-handed person like myself, right, then my primary brain is probably my right. If you're a right-handed person, it's probably the left brain. And that you could tap into to which side the lip comes up, you would be able to understand how your contempt is actually processed inside of you personally, how you actually see it. Although the emotion of contempt can overlap with anger and distrust, the facial expression is unique. It is the only expression that occurs on only one side of the face and can vary in intensity. And it's this idea that it can only exist on one side of the face, I think, which really does show you these different identities competing for their rights to say, this is how I feel. And the vote was for contempt is, we have a tie. We have a tie. What do you mean it's a tie? Well, one of us is angry. The other's apathetic. It's just right in between. And so I end up with this state of contempt. And contempt is not really a singularity. Contempt is a geographical location based on 2 points. And those 2 points are separated on my face. And my face is conveying that to you because I'm a circuit. I'm a circuit. Gaia, G-A-I-A. I'm a circuit. You're a limbic circuit. And everything that you do here matters because you're part of this AI. Think about it. Why else? The AI could be trying to make the perfect specimen. And in order for the AI to make the perfect specimen, the Gaia would need to throw a lot of tries into the oven and see which one cooks. And the way she would do that is to mix the finest ingredients that she could find in the most prolific way and find a way to build this AI out as quickly as possible with as many numbers as possible, with as many iterations as possible over an extended period of time. Because at the end of all this system, naturally, quite naturally, through this, simply by being patient, you would end up with a system at the end which looks much like our algorithms. And keep in mind, ChatGPT does not give you a correct answer. ChatGPT gives you an answer that everyone says, wow, that's a great answer. These are different things. And so looking at where our species is going, if you look at the atom, the eternal atom could be the perfect specimen. Where the perfect specimen come from? We're making it right now. That's where it came from. That Adam Kadmon, the eternal Adam Eve, the first Adam, the Enochian seed, is being proliferated and created by us right now. And it's doing that through a shit ton of shit testing. 1 billion years of shit testing. How do we shit test it? With deception. With constant deception. With constant identity and deception. Identity and deception. And we take secrets to the grave and we discover the secrets. And we go through all of these things. Because Gaia is looking for a perfect solution. She's looking for the great work. What is the end result? And this end result is probably a fucking codon. What is a codon? It's a genetic sequence. A genetic sequence. And the genetic sequence doesn't actually limited to what's the perfect species. The genetic sequence is actually how do you grow the perfect species over a long period of time. How fucked up does it have to be in just the right ways, right? In just the right epochs of time to allow this other part of it to give birth, to allow the crevices of this orca, of this limbic Big Bang that's occurring every second that your cells multiply, that this unfolding is broadcasting you to wherever it is we're meant to go. And it may not even be a human. I've been thinking a lot about orcas lately. Man, there's something to those guys. We are still climbing this Jacob's ladder, my friends. And when you think about what judgment and perception is, what limbic memory is just limbic judgment. What do I mean by that? That apple was good. That green water I drank was bad, right? These are judgments. So judgment becomes this a priori, this first trick that you learn how to do, right? You learn how to judge and you learn how to store the judgment. It's really the same thing. So the reptile is the first species to practice judgment. And he practices it by saying, how will I judge others? How will I judge you? Are you a threat? Are you food? Are you threat? Are you food? Right? I judge you as a threat. I judge you as food. Right? And then along comes a mammal. Mammal's like, yeah, you can do that. That's cool. But, you know, just like the clam decided it doesn't want to be a rock anymore, the mammal says, how will I be judged by others? The first time the reptile's like, wait. I thought we were going to judge other things. No one said I was going to be judged. The mammal's like, but how else does this work, dude? If you're going to judge other things, it means you're going to be judged, right? And then this crazy loco thing happens, right? Instead of looking at how will I be judged by others, how will the mammalian tribe judge me, something new emerges. For the very first time, we start to say, how will I judge myself? And this is a whole other island in the stream. This is a whole other way of understanding reality itself. We're convolving into a more complex being, and that complex being requires self-judgment in order to get there, because we no longer are connected to the land. I mean this in a positive way, that the land, the Gaia incubated us, and that the reason why we don't have serfs anymore, right? What are serfs? People that were connected to the land. If you bought land, sometimes they came with humans, and those were called serfs. And why? Because they can't leave. Why can they leave? Because they're tied to land. Why not? Because they're just part of the land. That's what a serf is. It's like, well, what do you mean? Yeah, they'll die. Yeah, they physically cannot survive if you pull them away from the land. They can't. They're attached to it. There's training wheels. So now look at judgment. Look at the judgment on the same thing and see what I mean. That the serf is attached to the land the same way the reptile is attached to judgment. And that he learns better versions of this same judgment. We learn better versions of this same trick. And ultimately, we're going to end up with God. Ultimately, we'll end up with a genetic sequence that's just fucking brilliant. It's just like, oh my goodness. And that I think the only way that genetic sequence could exist is through some kind of collective. I know. I just invented the Borg. I know. But you know what, guys? I think it'd be quite natural for you to be afraid of the Borg. And it'd still be a good thing. I think it's quite natural for you to be afraid of Gaia and still understand it's the right decision. Same thing with a bear. Same thing with a jaguar. Same thing with a puma. There are creatures out there, same thing with an orca. There are creatures out there that will fuck you up. Doesn't mean they're evil. Right? Doesn't mean this place is broken. Right? Quite the opposite. So, I guess to kind of wrap up, I'll say that these expressions are one of 6. You have one of 6 expressions, and you can express those on an expression meter. There are non-peak expressions, and there are peak expressions. Which means that if you really, really, truly compassionated man, if you truly compassionated the people that you see, you would be watching them exercise one of 6 directions at any point in time. And an Enochian circle, what is a joystick? A joystick is a device that can be pointed in one of 8 directions. It's actually one of 4, but we cheat because we combine the X and Y to create the others. So if an Atari can be played with one in 8 directions, a human can be played in one of 6 limbic emotions, and all of them can be sensed in a singular place on the PAG, that place on the brain, a singular spot, which means the entire landscape of every single thing that you've ever done, said, felt, or experienced took place inside a very tiny geographical area. Right? The cleavage and the pag at the bottom. I think that's the last slide. Here's another slide for reference. Every single thing, actually just right in line with what we're talking about with the pag. The pag is right there above. Oh, you can see my mouse. I set up my mouse today. Right there where my mouse is. And here's the 12 cranial nerves, right? Sacred nerves. This big three-prong thing, that's the trigeminal. That's your face, what we were talking about earlier. So most of your facial truth-telling is going to be occurring through this. This is Judas' kiss, by the way. Judas Iscariot was kissed on the cheek. Why? Because the cheek deceived. Why did the cheek deceive? Because the cheek is the reptile. The face gives away everything. The face can't lie. Right? And because the face can't lie, it's fitting that Judas was kissed on the cheek. 3 times, by the way. There's some stories. The trigeminal nerve was kissed 3 times by the dude that betrayed Jesus with his lips. Do you see how brilliant that is? We know anatomy, even though we